Hello and welcome to Mandibil. Welcome to part 13 of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's book, Essential Philosophy. Last time we looked at the chapter called Philosophy and Subjectivity. And I spent quite some time delving into that because there was some important stuff that I thought needed clarification. So it's taken a bit of time to get through this book. So let's see how many numerous parts it's going to be. But you know, if that's what it takes, well, that's what it takes then. So, okay, he starts off by saying philosophy is the methodology that helps you determine the difference between subjective experience and objective facts. Well, I was a bit critical of that framing. I mean, it's not completely wrong in the sense that, yes, you can do that, but more importantly, philosophy is that kind of thinking you are using to determine not the difference, but the actual content of what it means to experience something and what a fact is and what subjectivity is and what objectivity is, right? And then if you have that defined in your philosophy or settled axiomatically or however your approach is, well, then you can, determine the difference. But you need to have settled the other things before that. And okay, I guess to some extent that's what he has been delving into in the chapters before this. So it's not completely out of the blue, this one. It's just it makes it sound like philosophy is that's what philosophy is, right? And it's sort of a very, very simplistic way of framing it. And I don't like that kind of framing of broad terms and philosophy as how to determine a difference or something like that, right? That's not important for philosophy as such, right? It's actually settling what it means to be subjective and, experiencing and objectivity and facts and so on, right? Okay. Then he talks about truth a lot here, right? And there's also one here. I might add that one. Truth and falsehood exist as distinct states in only one entity in the universe that we know of, the human mind. So, I mean, it's just a very weird way of framing. It's talking about, hey, I have overview of the whole universe and I have checked all, beings possible, and only human beings can, have truth or falsehood, distinct states. And now they're sort of a state. What does it mean it's a state? Is it a mental state or what's that? So it's sort of this fluffy formulation. Okay, then it goes on to define truth is a state that results from a concept that results when a concept matches an entity or a hypothesis matches the facts of reality. So it's a state, so it is a result when a concept matches, but does it all on itself? Does a concept match an entity? I mean, if I experience elephant, right? Does truth pop out as if I mention the concept elephant as I'm experiencing elephant? Does truth just pop out as a state somewhere? It's a very weird formulation, right? Truth has to be stated, in my opinion, right? If I experience elephant, yes. If I were to make that, spell out that proposition about that elephant, it would be true to me, right? So, but I don't have to. I'm still experiencing. I don't have to make the proposition, right? The only reason to make a proposition is if there's somebody else around who with whom I need to agree or figure out what is going on, right? And I can make propositions. And the reason why I make that proposition is to establish something with somebody else. I don't need to make a proposition to get my own experience, right? And the other thing is that it matches an entity, but what is an entity? I mean, if I'm experiencing elephant, my mind has conceptualized that part of my experience as elephant. So it's an entity all of a sudden. Also, he used the term entity as the human beings as being the only kind of entity that he has a understanding that human beings are the only entity that can understand truth or falsehood, or have those states, whatever they are. So entities are apparently, what are they? I don't understand what they are, right? If I experience elephant, what does it is it matching something by its own accord, or do I have to match it with something? Do I have to compare that experience to my idea of what concept it is that it is referencing or has been cognized or recognized in the first place, right? But if I have the experience elephant, I have no way of knowing if I should experience elephant, right? I can just say that's elephant. In principle, it doesn't matter how many other people who will say it's a true proposition. They could be as, I mean, I have. It's not that I am out to reject any kind of knowledge or sort of nihilist or anything like that. But I'm just going with the understanding that I have an experience, and that's what I have, right? I don't have another entity which I'm comparing it to, right? Or my experience has to be compared to something that is better or more precise or more objective or something like that than my experience of elephant. What would it be, right? I have my experience and that's it, right? Okay. Truth always refers to concept or language and the degree to which they match what exists and occurs in objective reality. I'm not sure I understand what is meant by this. Truth always refers to concept or language and the degree to which they match what exists. But that's the proposition, right? Matching that's which exists. But are you saying that if I having experience of something, that means it exists? And if existence can be there without my experience, or my experience can be there without existence, how do I know the difference, right? Because if I experience elephant, I would call that a kind of existence, right? I have no way of knowing if I should experience that elephant. I have no way of knowing if I shouldn't experience that elephant, right? I can just say I'm experiencing elephant. So it's like in this objective reality, which is, it's just, and it all comes down to this bad metaphysics, right? Materialist metaphysics, which is fallacious and runs into the problem which is known as the hard problem of consciousness, which is a pointer that the metaphysics is bad as such, right? Another thing that I don't like is a degree to which it matches, right? Truth and false are a binary, right? I mean, if it's not true, then it's false. If it's not false, then it's true, right? It can't be, a proposition can't be 20% false or 80% true or whatever, right? It's not a degree, it's an either or, right? I think it's very problematic, this. Okay, then the standard of truth refers not only to the relationship between concepts and objects, but also to concepts about the relationships between objects, such as gravity or magnetism. So a concept is apparently something that is only in the mind, apparently, as far as I understand, while entities are those outside. But then he brings in objects. What are they then? Is an object and an entity the same thing, right? And to add to that, he conflates that with gravity and magnetism also as objects. Gravity and magnetism are not objects. I mean, it's like, what the fuck, right? So truth, I mean, if you understand truth by this, right? Truth and falsehood exist as distinct states in only one entity in the universe that we know of, the human mind. Truth is a state that results when a concept matches an entity or a hypothesis matches the facts of reality. Truth always refers to concept or language and the degree to which they match what exists and occurs in objective reality. And then the standard of truth refers not only to the relationship between concepts and objects, but also to concepts about the relationships between objects such as gravity or magnetism. So it's like, oh man, it's unworkable, right? I'm only getting more confused. As I point out, there are things that seem to be lumped together and terms that doesn't make sense or is not sufficiently clear, so they may feel like they're overlapping. And what is an entity and a concept, and all the, it's like it's just one big pile, right? It doesn't work for me. The relationship between concepts in the mind and matter or energy in the world is the relationship we refer to as truth. The relationship between concepts in the mind and matter or energy in the world is the relationship we refer to as truth. But the relationship, right? I mean, it's this I have in my mind, and there's this reality out there which he apparently also has access to, right? And he doesn't seem to have no problem with the fallacy or the inherent paradox that if something is outside his mind, he cannot possibly have access to it, right? It just goes with the idea of there's the mind and there's something outside the mind. And apparently seems to see, okay, but there's something in my mind, and then I'm comparing that to the outside. And it's true if it's the same thing. I mean, he's on the same track as I am. He just doesn't get that he only has his experience. He doesn't have this objective reality out there. Because if he did, that would also be a part of his mind. Otherwise, everything is mind to him, right? He is the universe. And if he isn't the universe, but then you have to say that his experience is not the thing itself, because that thing itself must be outside his brain or outside his mind. So if there's some representation in his mind of it, that's all he has. If he classifies that experience as being from the outside, which makes good sense to me. I mean, that's how it seems that we are put together. But that doesn't mean that what we experience is the actual thing outside, right? So, and another thing is that I pointed out before that, okay, if you have access to that objective reality, why the hell would you have some mental image that could be potentially flawed if you already have the right one with you, right? Why wouldn't you just stick with the good one and leave out the bad one, the concept version, if you have access to the real objective reality, right? Why would evolution would get rid of problems like that, right? If you're not identifying tiger because your mind doesn't say there's a tiger, but you have access to the objective world that can tell you, oh, but there is a tiger, right? And if that's the right one, however you know that, well, then that's much better than the potentially flawed one, right? So you would get rid of that and stick with the right one. But another problem is, well, how could you be that? How could you have access to that world? Because then you would have to be that world, right? So it's just, and this bad metaphysics leaves things much more complicated here than they absolutely need to be, right? So it complicates things so much more, and also it's incorrect. I mean, it's just incorrect, But a good way of seeing if something is missed in philosophy is that it gets more complicated, right? As you proceed, it gets more and more and more and more complicated because you haven't solved the original problem, right? Okay. Let's head into concepts and entities. As we grow from infancy, we notice that certain objects in our world, now it's called a world. So what is a world? And reality, and stick to the same words, right? Exhibit consistent characteristics. Chocolate is sweet, water quenches our thirst, carpets are softer than hardwood, and crayons taste terrible. We are able to develop accurate conceptual nets to cast around similar objects, so to speak, because those objects have similar or identical characteristics. The stability of objects and properties in the world is the foundation for the accuracy of our concepts. But you do not, again, it's like this is a huge problem, right? You do not have access to what those concepts you're referring to in your mind, supposedly, what they are based on. You are just saying the concepts are stable because I have some inductions in my mind so that I can recognize on a consistent, repeatable fashion, I can re-identify those concepts in that experience, right? So it's about figuring out how to understand how all this works in the mind, and he's on the wrong path here, right? Absolutely. It's stability of objects of properties in the world, but the world is what you experience, right? It has, just because it has been stable and have certain properties in the past and still have that in the now, doesn't mean that it necessarily must have it in the future, right? We're just so accustomed to that there's certain stabilities or sort of conceptual stability, right? An elephant is still an elephant as it was 40 years ago when you experienced your first elephant or whatever, right? But that doesn't mean that it must be stable in the future. That's just an inference, right? So it's like he's taking some things for granted without doing proper, deep philosophical analysis and being sufficiently skeptical about what you can possibly know and what you cannot know, right? So it's like everything is just taken, a lot of things are taken sort of for granted as if everybody understands that this must be the case, right? And that's also a sign of pretty bad philosophy, in my opinion. If you try to develop a physics of dreaming, you would quickly realize what an impossible task that would be. When we dream, objects, their properties, and the physical laws that govern them change continually, and sometimes it would... Yeah, but why are you bringing in dreams? Why not, for a change, use something that is an example of your everyday waking state of affairs, right? Why are you bringing in these dreams as something? Yeah, but it's not dreams, so therefore it must be objective or some whatever it is, right? So the dream world, leave it alone, right? It's not a part of philosophy as such. It's just something that goes on when you are asleep, right? And then the mind makes all sorts of weird stuff. Who cares what it is? Because when you wake up, you know that it was a dream, right? So it's not. You could philosophize about it, but in essential philosophy, I don't think that referring to dreams as some kind of, in any kind of argument for, when we're dealing with truth and objectivity and the world and experience and all that, right? Reality, it doesn't fit really. Can you imagine trying to play a game of chess where the rules for your various pieces changed continually and the pieces shifted shape as well? What would it mean to play such game? I don't know. Let alone win it. In debates, there is a logical fallacy known as moving the goalposts, wherein your opponent demands you prove X, and when you do, then he demands that you prove Y instead or in addition. You cannot win such debates because the rules keep changing. The only way to win is not to play. Objects in the world are consistent for two basic reasons. He can't tell you anything about why things are if the world is that thing outside his mind, he can't say whether or not they're consistent. He can only say that his experience has this kind of property or has this kind of his experience is put together this way, right? So just be aware that that's my clear distinction, that it's impossible. He is fabulating about something that he has no access to, right? The first is the existence of atoms. But how do you? Atoms is a mental construct, right? It's a mental attempt at objectifying what is going on when you use a very, very large microscope, right? And even most of it are models, not really experiences. So, yeah, but if you're talking about that external world, which eventually could be responsible for your experience and your objectification, then atoms is your objectification of that which might go on out there, right? So you're using your experience and putting that outside and saying to yourself, you're experiencing that outside and now you're experiencing atoms. But atoms were conceptualized by your mind in the first place, just by somebody else, and you have just taken over that theory or that hypothesis, right? That objectification, that model. So it's the same old problem with materialists. They pull the territory out of the map and then convince themselves that they're actually looking at that which creates the territory, right? So it's weird. The atoms that make up a feather possess different characteristics than the atoms that make up a bowling ball. The atoms that make up water are different from the atoms that make up arsenic. Atoms are subject to stable physical laws, which result in consistent object behavior, information about which our senses then transmit to our brain. No. The senses don't know about atoms or the sense signal. There's nobody sitting out there outside and inflicting to your senses and saying, now you should experience an atom, and then it's transmitted through your senses, and then the mind knows that this is supposed to be an atom. No, the whole experience and conceptualization has developed through evolution, right? And the mind is merely guessing. It's a qualified guess based on those experiences, right? And apparently there's the stability you can talk about is that the mind wouldn't evolve into objectifying if remembering those objects as concepts would make sense in order to, experience them at a later time, right? Because if you're objectifying something and you never see that again, well, it's a waste of time objectifying, and then that would die out during evolution. So you can say that stability you are referring to is there, but the only proof you have of that stability is your cognitive apparatus that does this objectification and apparently can re-objectify the same kind of thing at a later stage than it did when they first made that, or made the first objectification of that particular object or concept, right? Let me see, how far did I get? Milk that looks fair may taste foul. Our eyesight says it is healthy. Our taste buds report its danger. The skin of a shark feels smooth, rubbing from head to tail. Going the other way reveals the direction of its tiny barbs. In other words, we have valid concepts because of consistency of both atomic behavior and physical laws. This will be referred to as atomic consistency from now on for efficiency. Since our concepts describe the behavior of matter and energy, and the behavior of matter and energy is consistent, our concepts must be valid. To be true must also be, that's a bad argument, right? That's just a bad argument. It doesn't hang together with metaphysics, right? Good metaphysics. And he's saying Because I'm experiencing a ball and I've experienced a ball before, therefore balls exist outside my mind, and therefore, concepts are valid because, yes, but what does it mean that they're valid? It's like, you're stretching your ability to prove anything this way, right? You have to stay with your experience. Right? You can't say anything. The interesting thing is the future, right? And exactly the future is that which do not have anything to say about, because it's not here, or it's not a memory, right? So the future is completely black in that sense, right? You can have some ideas of what is going to happen, but that's based on the past and now, right? You're saying, okay, that's a bridge. Bridges tend to hold, so I'm going to walk over it. But you don't know that before you have done the thing you're proposing to do or inducing into your future, sort of, right? You can imagine the future, but just because you can imagine something doesn't make it valid or anything like that, right? So it's this fetish for making things universal and unchanging, and subjectivity is bad and objectivity is good, or something like that, right? That's sort of sowing the seeds for stacking some weird arguments on top of each other to reach that point, and certainty possibly, right? Empirical reality is not self-contradictory, at least at the realm of the senses, where philosophy operates. The realm of quantum mechanics is interesting, of course, but does not impact the realm of philosophy, because quantum phenomena cancels out long before we get to the aggregate realm of sense perception. Well, it's just weird, right? Quantum mechanics is not interesting, but atoms are, right? When I go down to the grocery store, I'm not having a list of atoms I need to get, right? Or my car is made of certain atoms. That's not how it works for me, right? So I'm not experiencing atoms. I have no way of experiencing atoms. This is a model and maybe a hypothesis about what is going on at a reductive level, right? This is sort of an attempt at creating some reduction level, reduction base based on matter and energy. But that's not something you can experience, right? That's just a theory. That's a model. That's a functional model of what might go on at these tiny levels, right? So he uses matter and energy to prove that the concepts are valid, but we can't do quantum mechanics, right? Not that I'm saying that I'm going to use quantum mechanics, but it seems like it's like, okay, atoms are fine, energy is fine, but quantum mechanics, no, right? That's just weird. Okay, a rock is a rock and not a cloud, fire, or the concept of rock. Yeah. So my metaphysics and therefore my epistemology is a far cry from what Stefan Molyneux is presenting here. So I don't want to keep going into the same criticism, which is basically his misunderstanding of metaphysics, which will lead to all sorts of claims here again and again, which is based on the same error, right? Okay, let's see. An elephant is not its shadow, the letter E, or a lizard. No, he keeps coming up with these. It's annoying, right? An entity cannot both be a living animal and fossil at the same time. No, I understand that. Relations between entities also cannot be self-contradictory. Gravity and magnetism cannot both repel and attract at the same time. A car cannot move both north and south at the same time, and a ball cannot simultaneously fall towards the ground and rise away from it. Thus, the properties and relations of entities in reality cannot be self-contradictory. If they appear so, this is due to an erroneous conclusion in our mind. A colorblind man may report that a rainbow is composed of differing shades of gray, but he would be incorrect because of deficiencies in his eyes. A deaf woman may wonder why people are dancing to mere vibrations, but of course the silence only feels real because of a deficiency in her ears. It's again this, it can't be this, it can't be that, it can't be this, it can't be that, therefore I must be right, kind of, just to cut it very short, right? He constantly talks about, it can't be this, so therefore it must be right. It can't be that, therefore it must be right. Why don't you philosophize about that which you are deeming to be right? Why don't you talk about correct statements rather than incorrect, contradictory statements, right? So it's always this, seems to me at least, that he constantly finds things that, but it can't be this, right? So therefore this must be right. But it's not a good way to argue proving something by saying it can't be this, it can't be that, and it can't be that other thing, right? So therefore it must be this. It's not a good way to argue, in my opinion. Reality is rational. No, rationality is your thinking, a kind of reasoning. And I would say when something is rational, you are reasoning towards value, right? You could reason about anything possibly, right? How to, dig a ditch on Iceland, right? Something weird. That's fine to reason about that, but I'm not interested in that. So if I was interested in it, I would reason about that, and then it would be valuable to me because I'm reasoning about that which could potentially be valuable to me. And the rationality of it is figuring out whether or not that particular reasoning ends up potentially something that is valuable. I will only know that when it happens, or when I do that or interact the way, whatever it is, right? But rationality is figuring out the value of that particular event based on reason, in my opinion, right? So reality is not rational, right? Rational is something that human minds are doing, right? It's not what reality does. So it's just a weird formulation. And valid concepts describe reality. Therefore, true and valid concepts must be rational and consistent. I mean, I don't buy these arguments. I'm just saying outright, it's simply too badly argued, right? It's simply too loose argumentation. Therefore, it's consistent and describes reality. Therefore, it's okay, right? It's purely mental gymnastics. It's not that there is not a direct connection with your direct experience or potential direct experience, right? There has to be a reference somehow to your experience. That's what we have to work with, right? So rationality is rational, consistent, and valid concepts describe reality. Therefore, true and valid concepts must be rational and consistent. But it's like, there's so many terms that are put together. I can't use that for anything in my everyday life, right? I can't stand at my car or a car and say, I have to figure out if this is my car. Okay, reality is rational, consistent. So a valid concept describes reality. Is it a valid concept? Well, I think it's a valid concept. So it must describe reality. Okay, so it must be consistent. But is it my car? This doesn't help, right? Okay, a tomato cannot both be a tomato and a beach ball. I mean, there it is again. It can't both be this or that. This is wrong, therefore I must be right, right? Thus, any concept that requires such a contradiction naturally invalid. Science, which describes a consistent, universal, and rational reality, must itself be consistent, rational, and universal. Describes a consistent, universal, and rational reality. Philosophical arguments which establish truth regarding objective and rational reality must themselves be objective and rational. Okay, concepts and validity. In relation to truth, there are three categories of concepts: valid, potentially valid, and invalid. A valid and true concept. But does it have to be both valid and true? Was truth, was it a comparison? He said over here. Truth is a state that results when a concept matches an entity or a hypothesis, right? Did I get too far here? No. A valid and true concept. So a concept can't be true because a concept is that which you compare it to, right? It has to be compared to something else for there to arrive the state called true. And now he's talking about valid and true concept. So he's contradicting his own statement in his definition of truth, right? This is, I mean, it's so freaking badly argued, this, right? It's ridiculous. Is one that has been verified and established both by its internal rational consistency. So now reality is rational, and internal rational, so consistency can be rational. Internal, but what does that mean in the mind? So reality is rational, and there's something in your mind that's also rational by its consistency with empirical observations. But it's the reality that is consistent, right? So if your concept is consistent also, then it matches, I mean, oh man, right? The idea that the earth is a sphere rather than flat is not internally self-contradictory. No one is saying that the earth is both a sphere and flat at the same time. And its roundness has been consistently verified throughout empirical observations, both on the surface of the earth and in space. Yeah, but not by you, right? Have you been in space? And verified Earths, right? So you're not talking about somebody else telling you this is my empirical observation. Telling you about an empirical observation doesn't make it empirical to you, right? This matter and energy making certain noises that you receive as a story about empiricism is not an empirical observation itself, right? So you can't be told what to know, right? You can't be told about the shape of Earth. You have to experience the shape of Earth to have verification of that empirical observation. The concept that airplanes can fly is validated by the laws of physics as well as by the empirical observation available every day. Well, yeah, it's constructed using physics, but you wouldn't fly a plane just without testing it or something like that, right? So you have to have some real life observations to actually do whatever it is you want to do, right? Available every day that airplanes do indeed fly. Okay, the concept that human beings are mortal is validated by the laws of biology as well as the empirical observation available. These are not, yeah, somebody dying doesn't mean that you must die in the future. I think it's highly unlikely that I'm not going to die at some point, but I don't know that I'm dying before I'm dying, right? When I'm dying, I will know that I'm dying. So I can't know about the future. You're mixing up. I'm not trying to make people believe that they are going to live forever, right? I'm just focusing on what it means to know something. And you don't know something about the future because you do not have empirical observations yet, right? You can make a qualified guess, but you don't have knowledge of it before it arrives. You can't say it's true before it's actually true, right? The concept that these are valid concepts. okay, I don't care about his valid concepts, right? I don't care about his claim about what is valid and what is invalid. I don't buy it. Potentially valid concepts are those for which there is no empirical evidence, but no internal self-contradiction either. For instance, the idea that silicon rather than carbon could be used as the basis for a living organism is not internally self-contradictory, but there is no evidence as yet of silicon-based life form. The position that intelligent life could exist on other planets is not internally self-contradictory, but no evidence as yet exists to prove this hypothesis. Invalid concepts are those that are self-contradictory and thus can a concept be self-contradictory? One example of a self-contradictory concept is the square circle, but it's not a concept. You're just lumping two things together and saying it's a concept. It isn't. I don't have a concept called square circle, right? It's not a concept. And I feel confident that my mind does not have the cognition, is not able to cognize square circle. It has a concept or a shape, you could say maybe, called circle and a shape called square, but they're all a part of my mind. Just lumping them together, you could say the self-contradictory concept pancake elephant, right? Yeah, you're just lumping two concepts together and say they're contradictory. Yeah, of course they're contradictory because you just lump them together, right? And I would even say a square or a circle is not a concept because it's not particular to one kind of a concept, right? An elephant is an elephant. That's it. There's no other, quote, thing that is an elephant but an elephant, right? So a leg is not a concept in itself because different concepts can have legs. But only one concept is elephant. Elephant is an unique object, right? That's what can be true in my opinion. Which cannot exist because the characteristics of squares and those of circles contradict each other. Another example of self-contradictory entity is the concept of consciousness without matter. Consciousness without matter? The concept of consciousness without matter. We never directly encounter consciousness in the absence of a brain. No, but if you don't, no. Brain is also a part of your consciousness. If you're using consciousness, it's the broadest term of what is going on in your mind, right? Brain is also a part of your consciousness. It's your experience of that thing, potential thing in the things themselves, which contains your mind. But your experience of it is your brain. What it is in reality, quote, you do not have access to, right? So your brain is also an experience. So you could say if there isn't a brain, you couldn't experience your brain because you wouldn't be able to have that experience which normally seems to be floating around in brains, right? So no, but it's your experience is not matter, right? And matter, but still worse is that matter is also a part of an experience. At least a modulation of a substructure of your experience. So you can't talk about matter as mind arriving from matter because matter is also about something within your mental experience. That's the problem with metaphysics. You're still caught up in this paradox, right? We never directly encounter consciousness in the absence of a brain. Empirically, no evidence exists to support the idea that consciousness can exist without matter. And all the evidence supports the reality that consciousness is an effect of matter, specifically the matter and energy that composes the human brain. Could consciousness exist without matter somewhere in the universe? Who gives a flying fuck, right? Certainly not for the following reasons. Consciousness is an effect of matter, since it requires the physical... No. It's not an effect of matter. You don't know what it is an effect of, but that which it potentially could be an effect of, you experience as brain / matter, right? So you're talking about that which you do not have access to and calling it matter or calling it brain, but brain is an experience that arrives after you have had the sensual experience of it, right? So you can't say I'm having an experience of that which is there before I have the experience. It doesn't work, right? And you can't use your memories or inductions either, because they were also based on an experience back in time, right? So you're putting the cart before the horse. You're violating basic metaphysics here, right? Okay, let's see. Gravity is an effect of matter, of mass, and all this gravity stuff. I'm not interested in that. Another way of looking at it is to think of a shadow. A shadow is an effect of opaque. Oh. Can we have a shadow with neither light nor a mass? No. Can we have sound without source of sound? No, we can't. Of course not. Consciousness is an effect of matter. No, it isn't. You don't know what it is an effect of, right? That which you call matter is something that is presented in consciousness of the physical brain specifically, and therefore cannot exist in the absence of a brain. Okay. Let's see if I think I will keep this one to the next part. So make this a short one. So, okay, hope to see you there in part, what is it? Part 14, I think. So, bye-bye.